I'm Matthew Kerbis, the subscription attorney, and this is Law Subscribed, your dedicated source for all things subscriptions and the law. Thank you to my sponsors. See links to them in the show notes. Everything discussed is only for educational and entertainment purposes. Enjoy the show. Thank you to the ABA. Thank you to the Center for having me to talk to you about this very important topic. And with that, let's just go ahead and get started because there's so much to cover. And you could easily give this presentation for several hours. I'm not going to, don't worry. All right, so let's get started. This topic today is AI and fee arrangements. I'm Matthew Kerbis, I'm the subscription attorney. Let me explain what that means. So I launched my firm in March of 2022. And since I knew from the beginning I was not going to be billing by the hour, I was going to be leveraging subscriptions, I had to be as efficient as possible. And I'm going to say this twice because this doesn't make sense when billable hour lawyers hear this for the first time. But when you're not billing by the hour, less time equals more money. All right, I'm going to say that one more time. When you're not billing by the hour, less time equals more money. And so the faster I could get substantive work done, the better. So I've been using AI since I launched my firm. I should also say I've been practicing for over a decade. So because I was using AI, in the beginning, and this was like not useful AI, this was like machine learning based, like if this then that logic and algorithmic based AI, I was always looking for a better solution. And so I was using GPT 3.0, which is the predecessor to ChatGPT. And so I was notified about when ChatGPT launched. So I was there since the very beginning of this generative AI revolution. And so because of that, and because this topic is very interesting and I find it useful for what I do, I also teach other lawyers how to use it in their practice. And I've been doing that for at least a couple of years now. I really took a year to get my feet wet. And then now I'm teaching other lawyers how to do it. And not just how to do it, but how to do it ethically, which is part of the conversation today. Because if you're using AI wrong, it doesn't matter about how efficient you are, or you're not even going to be that efficient. And so the paradigm shift in billing doesn't even make sense, right? So I also teach lawyers how to use and adopt hardware and software, and so it's related to efficiency, right? My target market is the latent legal market, which I will briefly explain because really I hear from lawyers, well, what about competition, right? Well, really, we don't have to worry about competition because compared to the potential market opportunity for lawyers, there's not even enough lawyers to possibly serve that market. So what you're going to learn in this session, and again, I could spend a lot of time on all these things, but essentially what it comes down to is implications of AI, efficiencies on billing time, some data on the latent legal market, and how to correctly use AI, and then the most profitable way to ethically bill clients using AI. And again, while this isn't like a legal ethics styled CLE, I think it still bears mentioning some of the legal ethics of it all. But before we even begin, let's look at a hypothetical. Let's say you charge $500 an hour. All right. That means that 10 hours of billable time makes you $5,000, right? Well, in this Gen AI world that we live in, 10 hours of billable time will only actually take 10 minutes. And realistically, like you're probably actually going to get there in 2 minutes. But then you're going to spend the next 8 minutes having back and forth with the legal AI tool of choice. And you're going to have actually far better work product than you ever would have had in those 10 hours. And you probably would have waited till the last minute, right, with those 10 hours. Well, now you get it all done in 10 minutes and be better off than where you were. So in this Gen AI world, $5,000 is only billable at $100, right? So what do? Well, do you raise your rates? Okay, let's take a look at that. To make 0.2 of an hour worth $5,000 means your billable rate would have to be $25,000 an hour, all right? That's a 5,000% increase to your hourly rate, right? Will your clients be happy to pay that? Are you ethically allowed to charge that high of a rate, right? Now, no legal ethics provided in the CLE, just everything's for educational purposes only. But even the next question, like what does that mean for serving the latent legal market? What does that mean for access to justice if lawyers just increase their billable rates across the board, right? So what are your options? Before we get there, let's look at the latent legal market. So according to Grandview Research, here's the link if you want to go there, about $400 billion was spent on U.S. legal services in 2024, right? That's an astonishing number. That's pretty big. Now, if you attend a lot of ABA events, you may already be familiar with this statistic, but the World Justice Project estimates that 77% of U.S. legal issues are unresolved by a lawyer. Right, so that means only 23% of the market is being served by lawyers. And by the way, those are people who know they have a legal problem, right? Like, so really, the number could be higher. And I've seen recently the Legal Services Corporation has said it's closer to 90% of legal issues go unresolved, right? Now, if you just do a little bit of inverse math there, I know lawyers, we don't love math, but basically the inverse of that is saying that, okay, $400 billion was spent on U.S. legal services, but only 23% of the market is being served. There's at least a $1.3 trillion market opportunity, right? And we're not even talking about legal aid, right? We're talking about the middle of people who don't qualify for legal aid, but need pricing certainty, which the billable hour cannot provide, right? So I think it's actually a large market opportunity, but this is what the data show. So generative AI, right? What makes it generative? I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I know this whole summit is about this, right? Well, it generates something, and analysis itself, like understanding unstructured data, something that this AI could really do that's really powerful. And why the analysis of unstructured data isn't itself generative, the output is when it's telling you what that analysis is, right? So when used correctly, and I want to say key correctly, Gen AI could revolutionize the practice of law. And saying correctly, I think, is important here because really these Gen AI tools, they are the power tools for language-based professionals, right? They're based on large language models. Now imagine if you hired a contractor and they billed you by the hour, and that contractor came over without any power tools. They had a handsaw, a screwdriver, right? And you're like, well, why am I paying you by the hour? I, the consumer of your services, know that there's power drills, that there's power saws, right? What are you doing? I'm not paying you by the hour, no way. Well, consumers of legal services are getting smart to this, right? So they know. Now imagine, okay, the contractor, they bring the power drill, they bring the power saw, they break out a 2x4, but then they take their power drill and they start drilling a lot of holes consecutively that touch. And then when they get to the end or there's enough holes there, they just smack down that 2x4 and it breaks. Is that an efficient way to saw a 2x4? Probably not, right? Did you still do it faster than with a handsaw? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Well, when you use AI incorrectly, that's what you're doing. You're using the wrong tool for the wrong task. And I'm going to make sure that you don't do that today because you really want to make sure you're using Gen AI correctly. Then you're going to get the benefits of the time savings when using alternative billing models like the subscription model, right? Another really important thing, and I just saw there's a standing order out of Texas that went live today, or at least that I was made aware of today. And it talks in there about how AI can only be as reliable as its training data. And that's actually not accurate. Like that's old information that is still being promulgated. That's not how AI is reliable. It's based off retrieving ground truth before giving its answer. How reliable is the ground truth, right? Gen AI itself, based off training data, is not a source of facts or data, okay? You are the source of facts or data, or you're working with a legal AI provider that is connecting to a database, right? You could build your own, which I'm doing, or you could connect to a database, an AI tool that is connected to a database of, say, case law. And while Gen AI is not perfect, it is far less prone to error than humans, and it's predictable, and it doesn't try to hide its mistakes like humans do, right? So I talked about retrieving ground truth. Well, this is a concept called retrieval augmented generation, right? And it matters a lot for lawyers practicing law using these tools because what it does is when you ask an AI a question or give it a prompt, a RAG, Gen AI tool, will go and retrieve information from ground truth and then augment its generated response to you, right? So that's what it's doing. It's confirming, it's improving the accuracy of its responses. It's not just giving you an answer based on training data. Imagine a person read the whole internet. Would you rely on them, right? No, but what if they could go and search before giving you an answer, right? So external knowledge sources, right? They can include documents, databases, APIs to these databases, right? And what I find using these tools every single day is there's almost no hallucinations. Like I'm not really experiencing any hallucinations because I'm using the right tool for the right purpose, and I'm only asking for fact-based information when I know that tool is using RAG. Right? Now, large language models, they may not be trained on the sources of truth, right? And I'm going to give you this chart to explain what that means, right? And so in the top left corner, this is where you want your tool to be when you're doing something like legal research, right? An industry-specific large language model using retrieval augmented generation. That's like giving a lawyer a task and they're able to go do legal research before giving you an answer, right? Now, when you're using tools that are GPT wrappers, which I'm going to explain on the next slide here, when you're using one of those tools, you're actually getting the top right corner, right? So you're getting, right now, the only tool I know that's in the top left corner is a tool called Paxton.ai, where they have a proprietary legal large language model. So they are using OpenAI, they're using Anthropic, they're using these other large language models out there for particular tasks, but they have a legal specific large language model. That's like having a lawyer doing the task. When you have these other legal tech platforms in the traditional legal research space that they now have legal AI tools for legal research, they are wrapping themselves around these other tools, but these other large language models, but these are general large language models. That's like giving someone with a PhD or a master's in English a legal research task. And maybe they're the smartest person on the planet and they have a master's in English. Well, they still might be able to give you a really good answer if you give them an open book test, right? This top right corner. but it's not going to be as accurate as a lawyer doing the research, right? Now, in the bottom left corner, you've got industry-specific models that maybe they're not using retrieval augmented generation. Well, what kind of tasks are those good for? Well, sometimes, improving documents or drafting documents from scratch, because maybe based on the training data, think the way you draft documents. Right? Maybe you start with a template, but you're making improvements to it. You don't necessarily need to look at a whole database of documents when drafting something or revising something. Well, that's where the bottom left corner comes in. And in the bottom right corner, OpenAI, like ChatGPT, should not be relied on at all for fact-based information when you're using the tool, but it has broad use cases for a lot of other really good things, like asking it what argument is and isn't persuasive. Like, it's still really good at that, right? But it shouldn't be relied on for fact-based information. But opinions, it's great. Use it. So a GPT wrapper, what it does is it's still useful, right? Like I used it earlier to say, like, it's not as useful when doing legal research as a legal-specific large language model. And that's true. But it's still really useful because even when you're using ChatGPT, you have to become this amazing prompt engineer. Well, when you're using legal-specific AI, even those that are just wrapping themselves around ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude or something like that, it makes the interface better that's purpose-built for whatever particular use, like law, right? So maybe you don't need to become a really good prompt engineer. You just have to click some buttons, and it will do all the prompting in the background, right? So that's still really useful for us, right? Now you don't have to become a prompt engineer anymore, because what it's doing is it's just making that user interface more friendly. And you could ask yourself, well, do you know how to code? I don't know how to code. I'm not technical. My background is in philosophy and law. But when you use software, like we're using Zoom right now, there's all this code running in the background. I don't know how to code, but I know how to use software. Well, think of these GPT wrappers as like the same thing, but for large language models, right? It just makes the user experience better. And it lets you leverage these models a little bit more, right? Now, sometimes using the models directly might yield, you could maybe get better results, but to get there will take more time, and you need to be a better prompt engineer. And so maybe like that savings isn't worth it for a lot of situations, right? So in any event, I keep talking about this for a long time. I do have to move on because this part's even more important, right? So even if you forget everything I say today, when using AI to have an alternative fee-based practice, this is what you should be thinking about when using these tools. Gen AI is like the smartest person on the planet who's your assistant. They've read everything on the internet and they work for free, or, much lower cost than a human assistant, right? Like I mentioned Paxton earlier, like, the monthly pricing is $200 a month, but still less than what you're going to have to pay an associate, right? Now, here's the thing about this Gen AI, smartest person on the planet who's your assistant. They're an entry-level worker. This is their first job, and it's their first day on the job. And it's like that every time you start a new conversation with them, right? If you keep this in mind when interfacing with the tool, what are you going to do, right? You're going to give a lot of context. You're going to follow up and iterate on what the work product is. You're not going to expect it to be perfect, but you know that they're the smartest person on the planet. They're going to get there, right? You just have to help them get there. So you wouldn't give up the first time, right? Now, would you trust this person as a source of truth? No, of course not, right? This assistant, they're also not well socially adjusted, so they don't know how to say no or ask follow-up questions unless there's a good GPT wrapper where that has been trained, right? And tools like GC General Counsel AI, that was one of the first tools I ever saw that in, and it was amazing. It was mind-blowing. It asked clarifying questions before giving an answer. Tools like Paxton have copied that. Now they're doing that when necessary. And there's some other tools that are doing this too. I think I've heard it's on the VLEX roadmap for Vincent AI, though I haven't actually seen that yet. I've heard that they were working on something like that as well, right? Now, what Gen AI is not is a calculator, right? 2 + 2 = 4 is an immutable truth, and once programmed, it always gets it right. It's deterministic. But language is all made up. We made it up. The meaning changes with the context, right? So these are probabilistic models. It's just guessing the next most likely word, right? So that's why it can never be relied on its own as a source of truth. So highlighting here what makes AI legal specific, they'll tell you it's designed for legal. That's not enough, but it is a good start, right? The inputs, uploads, prompts will not train underlying large language models. Paxton recently announced that they have achieved HIPAA certification and they are SOC 2 compliant, right? A lot of these other AI tools are coming out and announcing those things as well. I'm a Paxton user, so I get those notifications when they get pushed out. Let me tell you about the brand new sponsor for Law Subscribed, Paxton. I've been using Paxton as my legal AI tool for over 2 years. I continue to evaluate and demo other legal AI tools in the market and still decide to stick with Paxton because of its reliability, its accuracy, its ease of use, affordability, and they do not lock you into a long-term contract. Now, as a transactional and fractional general counsel attorney, I'm using Paxton for all of my substantive and non-substantive legal work, whether that's legal research, analysis, drafting, or enhancing existing legal work product. In the time it used to take me to draft and analyze legal documents, now, after a little bit of back and forth with Paxton, I have something ready to go in minutes that used to take hours or even days. While I'm no longer a litigator, I could see how valuable Paxton would be when researching a new issue, preparing for a deposition, drafting a motion, or going to trial. So if your firm would benefit from using Paxton as your legal AI tool, then make sure to use the link in the description when signing up to let Paxton know I sent you. That's all about our new sponsor. Now back to the show. Each user and or client will have a separate layer, separate instance. These tools, the jargon differs, but ask your legal AI vendor about these things, right? And the company reps, just like with cloud stuff, they can't access your prompt history or your data unless they're like helping you resolve an IT issue or something like that, right? So the general use AI tools, right, they're super powerful. Think of it like fire, but when there is a purpose-built tool, it's better. It's more like a blowtorch, right? And so they typically don't use RAG. Companies can access your prompt histories. Like you've been here at the summit. You're learning all these things, right? I do want to point out my favorite general use tools: Perplexity, Notebook LM Plus, and Descript. I don't have enough time to go into them. When looking at the different sorts of tools that are out there, at the end of this slide deck, I don't have time to go into it today, but I have all the actual tools, right? So tools that fall into these categories, different competitive tools that do different things that are these types of categories, right? Legal AI assistance, research, all-in-one tools. I call the assistants the all-in-one tools, right? And then there's augmentation tools, which are not necessarily AI first, but they are leveraging AI to augment your ability as an attorney to get work done faster. So final AI tips, right? Natural language is the interface. Don't be afraid to use it. If you could email and text, you could use Gen AI. Follow up. It's not a calculator. You need to have a conversation with it, right? Context windows matter, meaning eventually, just like people, we have short-term memory limitations, right? If you're using these free tools, don't just tell it something, give it a persona, right? You are a lawyer, you are a judge, you are a juror, that kind of thing. You are a potential client, right? The future is agentic, so look out for agentic AI or AI agents. Keep an eye on that. Leverage it for non-legal tasks. Even if you disagree with me about alternative fees, you could use it for non-legal tasks. And think of AI access as a subscriber benefit, which brings us into the end of the billable hour, right? Time to talk about the subscription model. Finally, we've got about 10 minutes left. And we've got to talk about the subscription model. Well, here we go. Well, wherever you are, you probably have a rule that's like this in Rule 1.5 in the comment section, which ultimately says a lawyer should not exploit a fee arrangement based primarily on hourly charges by using wasteful procedures. Well, I just taught you how to use AI the right way. And so now, if you're billing by the hour and using AI, you're not going to be profitable if you're billing time, right? But you don't have to, right? So why the subscription model? Because not using AI in your practice means you are exploiting a fee arrangement based primarily on hourly charges by using wasteful procedures. Now, adoption of most legal tech eliminates billable hours. Client expectations have changed. Remote meetings are expected, right? Cost transparency is demanded. Easy scheduling is expected, right? Well, what's the benefit of the subscription model? Well, for you, the business owner, there's predictable monthly recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue, right? So you could strategize your marketing spend, your equipment upgrades, how many more staff or employees you could hire to grow your firm, or software or AI tools you could use, right? Now you have predictable income, predictable revenue, right? But it's also predictable for the clients, right? They have pricing transparency, right? You have to well scope what's included in each subscription benefit. And it's like, well, what happens if a client's taking a lot of my time? Well, they shouldn't be. You should figure out how to productize and automate it using AI and legal tech. But even if you can't, that's what subscription tiers are for. Oh, you client, you signed up at level 1, but you're really a level 2 or level 3 client, right? And then you sign them up for the higher level where they get more access to you, right? Because at the end of the day, then clients will not be afraid to call or contact you, which means they're bringing you more business and they're staying subscribed. right? It fosters ongoing relationships with clients. I was meeting with a client at a Starbucks to quickly sign something that still needs a wet signature in Illinois. And there was this 80-something-year-old retired attorney at the table. And we started talking to him. And he said, reflecting on his career, he worked for a big firm. He went in-house for the government. And then he had a solo practice for over a decade. And he said his least favorite thing about practice was invoicing clients and having to collect on clients, right? It did the opposite of fostering relationships with clients. All right. Because now when you're not billing time, you're incentivized to be efficient and effective with technology. I sometimes get asked, how do you demo so many tools and evaluate so many tools? Like, how do you do it? How do you even make any money? Because I'm financially incentivized to be more efficient. So I want to learn about all the AI and efficiency tech that's out there, right? And you can't scale without more hiring. You don't need to hire in order to scale. You could productize. You could bring in more clients. You could automate, right? You could overcome the labor shortage. So subscription model benefits include, and these are for the lawyers, whether for you or the attorneys you're employing, reduced burnout, improved mental health. Attorneys are rewarded for efficiency, right? We could compete with other industries as we move towards a 4-day work week in this AI efficient world that we're going into. It alleviates the need for re-regulation of legal services like in Utah, Arizona, and other alternative legal service providers. We could both increase access to justice and attorney bottom lines. And that's okay, right? Another thing is lifetime value for and from clients, meaning instead of thinking, oh, this one case took so long, I quote unquote lost money on it, which is not the way to think about it anyway, but I hear that from lawyers. Well, you have to think about, well, will they be a client for longer? And will I be able to capture more revenue for them for giving them more value over time? Because I didn't overbill them in this situation, right? You start thinking about it from a long-term perspective instead of a short-term perspective when serving clients, right? There's huge market opportunity. That's the latent legal market that I talked about. That's that blue ocean market opportunity. But then there's institutional clients who want to cut costs, right? That's where the competition is. But really, there's this huge other ocean that I'm swimming in of potential clients who need pricing certainty, right? This allows us to compete with companies like LegalZoom, but actually provide legal services, right? I talked about the latent legal market. So how do you adapt it? There's the pure subscription model. There's subscription plus flat fees, right? So it's not just all in one, all subscription. There's subscription add-ons, right? What you do is you unbundle all of your legal services and figure out where can you add it back on and how do you tier your models, right? Now, no one form of subscription or subscription plus flat fees is going to work the same way for every practice area. So it does depend on your practice area. Transactional is different than litigation, right? Like in transactional, pure subscription can work a lot better. I've seen it work for litigation when a lawyer has an honest conversation with their client about what's your annual budget for this, right? And what should we charge you per month, right? Realizing some months we're just to have a status call. And other months, we're going to be doing a bunch of discovery, right? So I've seen it work with litigation, but it requires a transparent, honest conversation with your client. Otherwise, pure subscription model does work better as a transactional attorney. But what I've seen work really well, and what I've helped some lawyers and law firms, because I am a practitioner, Subscription Attorney LLC, that's my law firm, right? But I have helped some practitioners structure a subscription plus flat fee model where because whenever you start a case in litigation, there's a lot of upfront work. Right? There's drafting and responding to the complaint, propounding and responding to discovery, all this work up front. So there's a higher fixed fee up front, a monthly recurring fee, and then depending on the practice area and the jurisdiction and the rules of civil procedure in that jurisdiction, maybe the monthly fee goes up once you hit certain milestones, like when you get to oral discovery, when you get to expert discovery, when you get to trial, right? Like that changes. And then what I've also seen work really well is a success fee, right? If we settle and resolve your case before we hit that first milestone, then we get a high success fee. And as we cross certain milestones, whether that's based on how much time has passed, like months, or based on, once we get to oral discovery, and then that success fee goes down because you want to align incentives with your client on getting the case resolved faster, right? And I could talk pricing all day. So with the pure subscription model, just some broad examples, right? In the trademark space, right? Unlimited cease and desist, right? Monitoring, unlimited communications, right? Scheduled communications, not this, they could call you whenever they want, but they have to schedule it, right? Fractional general counsel, this is what I do. This is a large part of my practice. Document marketplace with optional automated legal advice. In a perfect world, I would also have something like this. I'm kind of working with somebody on something like this right now. Legal adjacent services, right? So even if you don't think of something as that's like high-end legal services, like just being a registered agent for one of your clients, like that's a service. It's not like you don't need to be a lawyer to be a registered agent, but your firm can be a registered agent, right? Or you got somebody off onto probation in criminal law, and now you could have a compliance program,
right? Maybe it's all automated. Maybe it's all video, like it's a video training program and it includes some scheduled 15-minute calls, right? So like think about other adjacent services to traditional legal services where you, the lawyer, can provide a lot of value and nobody's going to pay you by the hour for it anyway, right? Subscription and flat fee model, right? These are like one and done things, corporate formation, real estate, just any sort of general transactional work, estate planning, right? Unbundled services, right? Then maybe you do add-ons, flat fee add-ons. So like my clients subscribe all starting at least $20 a month and then they get flat fee add-ons, right? Depending on what they want to do. Sometimes with these estate planning or real estate or corporate formation models, an annual subscription is a really nice offering. Right? Okay, 1 year from now, that annual subscription gets you could schedule 15-minute calls with me. You get a discounted rates on other things. And preferably those discounted rates are fixed rates or subscription add-ons. And then at the end of the year, I will do your annual submissions with the state, with the Secretary of State for you, right? And with estate planning, we're doing annual check-in. Or if you want to do more than an annual check-in, you'll pay a higher annual subscription and we'll check in 2, 3, or 4 times a year. Right? And if I need to make changes, well, for the highest level that you're getting 4 check-ins a year, you're just going to get those. You're going to get those amendments included in your annual subscription if you have them. And for the other 2 levels of annual subscriptions for estate planning, it's a lower fixed rate to do an amendment or a codicil to your estate plans rather than the higher fixed rate that we charge to non-subscribers, right? Because you want to incentivize them, subscribe. And really, that stuff's in the best interest of your clients because you're going to keep them in compliance and you're going to protect them. So this is not a let's find more ways to just generate revenue. No, this is the subscription model aligns incentives so things are in the best interest of your client. And again, I already talked about how this works in litigation. For pricing subscriptions, keep it simple, right? No more than 3 offerings at a time. Give options, give tiers, different levels. I've given some examples already. Give a low accessible price for the market you're trying to serve, right? So you have to identify the market you're trying to serve and what prices are they already used to paying on subscription because, by the way, they're subscribing to a lot of stuff already, right? Offer subscription add-ons to lower level subscribers that you bundle back in to upsell the higher level subscriptions. But you give them a discounted rate than if they were to do it all a la carte, right? You want to incentivize they subscribe at the higher levels, right? So see my website for examples, right? I choose $20 a month to be competitive and I'm serving everyday people and I'm serving small business owners as their fractional GC. I charge $50 a page. If I don't already have an automation built, right? I have 3 buckets, 2 tiers per bucket. I don't really offer this anymore, but I need to update this sentence. But I think there's an opportunity here to offer this as a employee benefit to employers for their employees, right? And there's my URL, subscriptionattorney.com/hashtag. Don't forget the hashtag all access to see my menu of services. And I see we have a question in the chat here. We are running short on time, so let me fly through the rest of these slides and then I'll get to the question. Easy unsubscribe and resubscribe, right? That's even before that was an FTC rule. I think that's just good way to conduct business. They have the same account information. They could always sign back in, right? Maybe you offer them to, hey, I see maybe you didn't want to pay that much. Maybe you go down a level, right? Or maybe if you sign back up, maybe this is a more appropriate level for you, right? Now I take the anti-law firm approach, right? My logo, my firm name, the way I don't dress in a suit, but there's opportunity for traditional looking law firms, even though that's not the choice that I've made. Pick a trade name, niching down, right? Then there's huge non-English speaking opportunities for those clients. So again, I have all of the different options for these technology solutions. At the end of my slides, there's not enough time today for me to go over all of them, but here's the different categories of technology that you will need to have an efficient practice. There are some all-in-one solutions. I am much more a fan of best-of-breed tech, and I even give a hardware and software CLE that should be out there somewhere. If you subscribe to my podcast, that's coming out in a couple months. So some final tips, look for tools with unlimited usage as part of the subscription. Calendly is a great tool that comes to mind for that, for scheduling. Subscriptions are about scale, so the more clients you sign up, the more it makes it you could afford to pay for these tools. They start paying for themselves. It's easier to upgrade stuff when you know how much money you're making, plain and simple. And the same is applicable to any monthly spend, right? Insurance, salaries, rent. I mean, I'm a virtual law firm, but whatever recurring spend. And in addition to all the tools I've provided, there's marketplaces like LawNext, Legal Tech Hub, and Above the Law to check out. So stop billing time and switch to a more profitable business model. Be transparent with your fees everywhere so that you're in compliance, but also it's a good way to do business. So again, I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My law firm is subscriptionattorney.com. My podcast, if you're interested in this subject, where I interview other lawyers. I also have a How to Run a Law Firm in 2025 series going on with another tech-forward solo practice attorney out of Denver. over, www.lawsubscribe.com, or search Law Subscribed on all the podcast apps at YouTube. If you want to see a way I'm leveraging that podcasting skill for marketing my firm, you can check out the Law for Kids podcast. I do have a course. There's just a wait list because I'm a practicing attorney first, and so I can only really work with 1 or 2 attorneys at a time. And that's my email. The best way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. So looking at this question now, and then I think we only have time enough for the one question. So much of your work in litigation is reactionary to the activities of the opposing side. For example, right. So again, the subscription model, right? If they're throwing a bunch of stuff at you that's going to take time, and in a case management conference that you explain to the judge, we need more time because they filed all these motions, they've subpoenaed all these witnesses, that's going to be a longer case. It's going to be more months, right? And when you're getting paid every month, you're getting paid every month. It just comes down to properly scoping your services and finding the right monthly price that you are making money and the client is willing to pay, because when you're getting that monthly price, you're no longer tracking time at all. And then if you're in Illinois and you have a progressive licensing body, ours is our Supreme Court, we have a new rule that goes live and that becomes effective in July of this year of 2025, where it explicitly now says if you're using an alternative fee, you don't need to track time to recover fees if you're filing petitions or motions for fees. So as more jurisdictions adopt that, and by the way, they were just clarifying something they thought was already the case, but they had to clarify it, right? So when you're not tracking time, you're going to be way more efficient, right? You're going to use these deposition-based legal AI tools to do 90% of the prep work that used to take hours and hours and now takes 10 minutes to prepare for a deposition. So things are just not going to take as long as they take when you're leveraging the AI tools that you used to, right? I mean, frankly, I with the AI tools that are available, other than like subpoenaing people and getting them in for a deposition, I see no reason why cases need to take as long as they take anymore. They really should not. As a former litigator of 8 years, I'm a transactional attorney now, but I litigated for 8 years. I see no reason why cases need to take several years anymore. I mean, there are some exceptions to the rule, obviously, but in most situations, it's just like lawyers have too much stuff going on. Well, with the AI tools making things so much faster, it shouldn't take as long anymore. But that comes down to how you scope your services and how you price it, and when you're no longer billing by the hour, you find more efficient ways to do things. So the last thing I'll leave folks with, and then I'm out of time, is if your licensing body, be that your Supreme Court or your State Bar Association or what have you, said in 1 year from now, we are banning the billable hour, we're deeming it unethical, just based on the existing rules, because I think it is, then what would you do, right? Lawyers are really smart, and I am patting myself on the back a little bit when I say that. But you know, if you had no other choice but to use an alternative structure, what would you do? And figure it out, and you will figure it out. And there's ample opportunities out there to figure it out.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Make someone's day by sharing this episode with them. The best way to get in touch is to follow and message me on LinkedIn. To get extra content, subscribe to the newsletter at www.lawsubscribe.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber to get episodes and content early. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.